Hello, sissies, gays, and theys. Welcome back to another episode. I am really looking forward to this one. I want to talk about AI, and I happened to watch this documentary a few nights ago that I was just like, oh my god, I have to talk about this on my channel. So, there's a documentary on Tubi right now called Johns of Disco. So it's about this UK Euro disco singer named Jen Harrow, and Jen Harrow was huge in Germany and Italy and Russia. Like, basically their late 80s version of like Michael Jackson, Prince, George Michael, right? Like, this person was huge, and he was so big over in that part of Europe actually that he was like the number one artist at the time when Michael Jackson was huge here. Like, over there, Michael Jackson was number two. So this person was like a huge deal. He was like a really attractive, white boy. Had the look, had the image, had the outfit, and that really like catapulted him to superstardom, of course, with his songs. And what we find out is that he actually wasn't singing his own songs, that there was a person that actually recorded and sang those songs for him, and that person's name is Tom Hooker. And it was really fascinating because while I was watching, I was just like, wow, like, one, I'm sure this happens a lot in the music industry, and we don't necessarily know. I mean, we've had rumors around singers for years that this is the case, right? But I think this is the first documentary I've personally seen where I'm seeing someone actually talk about their experiences as like essentially like a ghost singer, someone that like either wrote or recorded these songs that catapulted someone else to superstardom. And what Tom Hooker did is he recorded his own original song because him and Jen Harrow were on the same label, but they decided to stick with Jen Harrow because of the overnight success that catapulted him to this fame. So Tom Hooker was kind of cast aside, and so Tom Hooker has lived several lives since. I'm sure Jen Harrow has lived several lives since, and at this point in time, Tom Hooker wants to reclaim that time in his life. And I think he went on Facebook or social media and told the public that he actually is the voice of Jen Harrow, did a press conference and proved with his singing voice that it was him that was the voice of Jen Harrow all these years. And so what the documentary explores is how both men contend with this evidence, with the facts once the news is out, how fans contend once news is out. And there's a lot of denial on fans' parts. There's a lot of rationalizing of like, oh well, Tom Hooker is the voice, but he's not the image, right? He's not the image that we see. So that's what we care about. Is Jen Harrow is Jen Harrow. Where there's other fans that are like, oh, like if Tom Hooker is actually the voice of Jen Harrow, then that needs to be acknowledged and respected. And between the two men themselves, what Tom Hooker had wanted was just acknowledgement. And from my personal perspective and opinion, I saw Jen Harrow be very reluctant to even acknowledge like the contribution, and to just be like, well, I was the face, so I don't understand why it's a big deal. And so we see a lot of, back and forth in the interviews of how the men perceive each other, how they perceive that time, and what they're living their lives like now. And the reason why I bring up this sparked an idea about AI to me is because it really brings forth the idea of ownership, of owning one's voice, of the future consequences of our present actions. I think AI has potential to do wonderful, good things in our world. I think particularly within the medical field, if it can advance treatments or cures, and I'm all for it. I think particularly when AI comes to education, music, media, I think that's where for me it gets really dicey, because if we have these tools that can sound like our favorite artist without their consent, and that music is put out, then the artists suffer. Yes, we get maybe objectively good music, right? But the artists suffer when we use it to create art instead of supporting actual artists. Those artists, the painters, the crafters, I don't even know where that word just came from, but you know what I mean. Like, those people suffer. And the thing that's not really being talked about, that I've seen maybe a handful of times on the internet, is how AI, these data centers are largely placed in black communities that are already in disenfranchised areas, maybe in the Midwest, maybe in the South, and even being placed in rural white areas too, right? So it's like being placed in areas where people need jobs, and people know this. People with massive wealth know this. There was a news story that I saw. I didn't check whether or not it was, a real story. Wait, I did. Sorry, I did check, and it was a Kentucky woman that was offered I want to say 10 million for her farm. I think she owns a cattle farm, and the person said, I told them no, because my livelihood is here, the land is here, my cows are here, this is how we live, this is how we survive, and this is how we'll survive long after, basically to provide a legacy for her own family, for the community. And she was like, this money doesn't mean anything to me. And so when you juxtapose that to these corporations' greed, that leads into like an individual, I think, moral question that we have to ask ourselves is like, how far are we as a society willing to take technology, specifically AI, and what's our individual stance and obligation towards it? And I think we're gonna see a lot more of what showed up in that documentary of, okay, who actually owns these things? What good is it doing, not in the present, but what good will it do in our future? And who gets to profit off of it? Who gets the accolades or awards off of it? What are the side effects of it, right? And so I think we're going to continue to see this, on our screens a lot, specifically within the music industry, within the industry of art. And I hope people, begin to wake up, begin to really understand, like, this is going to impact people, like I said about the news about the rural farm worker, that this is already impacting people with normal everyday jobs as much as, the artist that we, know and love. And the thing for me that I think is interesting is particularly around education, when we already have such a declining literacy rate in our country. Being able to write an essay is something that people in my generation, as a millennial, we had pen and paper, right? And then eventually it was like, okay, we can type this up on a computer. But it's like, if teens in high school and then young adults in college don't even know how to write an essay, then like, what's the point of them being shepherded still into a 4-year degree program when being able to write should be foundational, should be baseline? And post college, there's the questions of like, how is AI going to impact our workforce? What industries are going to be impacted? And so these are all just questions that I had, after watching this documentary. I think it was a really good example of, owning work within the music industry, the capitalistic nature of that business. A lot of what I saw was like a lot of hindsight. It was just like, oh, like, we did what we had to do, like, in the moment, but everything's fine. And it's like, well, no, everything's not fine, because this person, Tom Hooker, like, worked for those songs. He became a very successful artist, actually. When I say artist, a photographer. So he became very successful with that. But that's because he learned how to pivot. He had this eye, right? But imagine the artists that don't want to pivot, or maybe don't have an eye for something else. So it's like, of course, in hindsight, it's easy for you to be like, oh, it happened, everything's fine. But it's like, in that moment, the actions you chose had consequences for both people, for both Tom Hooker and Jen Hara. So yeah, if you like this video, this is my first big pop culture video. So if you like it, please give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Overall, I hope you have a good day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.